Jeremy Peregrine, a man shaped by the vast rural expanses of Illinois, passionately dreamed of an existence that transcended the boundaries of his agricultural small world. Born and raised among crops and barns, his life had always been governed by the slow and steady rhythm of rural life, an existence as peaceful as it was monotonous. However, within him burned a vivid and audacious dream. He longed for a better life, richer in experiences and emotions. This desire did not arise out of nowhere. The seed of this dream was planted and nurtured by his grandfather, an old musician whose once prosperous career had faded into a mere shadow of its former splendor. Yet, decline had not stripped him of the gift of storytelling, and through his words, Jeremy's imagination was ignited. "You know, Jeremy," the grandfather began, with the guitar resting on his lap, "there was a time when I played for hundreds, even thousands of people. The brightness of stage lights, the thunderous applause, the music. Ah, the music. It was like an electric current pulsing through me. They loved me, and I loved every moment." Jeremy, sitting at the foot of his grandfather's rocking chair, absorbed every word, every inflection in the old musician's voice. The boy's eyes shone, reflecting the flickering flames of the fireplace, but more than that, reflecting a dream that was beginning to take shape. "Grandpa," he once asked, with a mix of shyness and excitement, "what was it like to feel loved by so many people? To be such an extraordinary person?" The grandfather smiled, a sad and nostalgic smile. "It was wonderful, Jeremy," he replied, looking at the crackling fire as if he could see his youth dancing within the flames. "But it was also frightening. The pressure, the expectation, everything comes at a price." The stories of the grandfather, infused with past glories and missed opportunities, illuminated Jeremy's imagination, fueling his ambition for something more, for a life that was his and no one else's. Though young, Jeremy felt something awakening within him, a calling, a longing. And he knew, in that moment, that his grandfather's legacy, his music, and his stories would be the compass that would guide him in search of his better life. Upon reaching his 20s, after long seasons working on various farms and odd jobs, Jeremy managed to accumulate enough to begin his journey towards his dream. He packed his modest belongings, took his guitar, a gift from his grandfather, and embarked for the bustling metropolis of Chicago, a city that promised opportunities for those brave enough to seek them. The arrival in Chicago was marked by shock and awe. The skyscraper horizon, the cacophony of sounds, the thousands of people, everything was immensely different from his quiet town in rural Illinois. He was in a new world, a world where he needed to prove his worth. Proving his talent was a titanic challenge. The city's music venues were filled with artists seeking recognition, each with a unique story, all yearning for the same dream. Jeremy managed, after much effort, to secure a job as a waiter in a busy restaurant, serving customers from morning till night. But young Jeremy Peregrine was not the type to settle for mediocrity. The waitstaff job provided only sustenance, not the fulfillment he sought. The dream of becoming a great musician still called to him, like a lighthouse shining in the midst of a stormy night. So, in those moments when his work allowed for a break, or when the night fell and the streets of Chicago began to calm down, he would take his guitar and play. He would sit on the sidewalks, his back against a brick wall, the guitar case open in front of him, and he would sing. He sang in exchange for a few coins, but more than that, he sang to share his dream, to touch people's hearts with his music, just as his grandfather had touched his. The notes Jeremy plucked from his guitar echoed through the street, carrying the passion and soul of a young man who refused to give up. The lyrics of his songs were portraits of life as he saw it, chronicles of his struggles and dreams. Every chord, every verse, was a step closer to the dream he desperately longed to achieve. And even on the coldest nights, he continued to play, warmed by the flame of his dream and the faith in himself. On a cool autumn night, under the dim light of street lamps, Jeremy performed his routine, skillfully strumming his guitar and singing songs that sprouted from his soul. A distinct figure appeared in the crowd of passers-by, an older man, dressed elegantly, with a penetrating gaze that showed familiarity with the world of showbiz. This man was Albert Monroe, the owner of one of Chicago's most prestigious nightclubs, known for his keen sense of discovering hidden talent. Something in Jeremy's solitary melody attracted him, something in the passion with which the young man sang caught his attention. "Boy, what a voice you have," Monroe commented, approaching the young musician. His gaze was fixed on Jeremy, analyzing him with interest. "Thank you, sir. I just try to put my soul into every note," Jeremy replied, surprised yet grateful for the compliment. "I think I can offer you a chance, kid," Monroe said, a hint of excitement in his voice. "Why don't you come and sing at my nightclub? Who knows what might happen?" Jeremy accepted the invitation without hesitation. After all, it was a unique opportunity. And so, he began to perform regular shows at Monroe's nightclub. The audience quickly fell in love with his music, and his talent caught the attention of influential names in the music industry who frequented the place. Monroe's network of contacts extended throughout the city and even parts of the state. Jeremy's fame began to spread like wildfire in a dry forest. With each show, more and more people came to listen to the voice and music of the Illinois country boy who was conquering the big city. Every night, Jeremy's star shone a little brighter. And as his voice echoed through the walls of the nightclub, Jeremy's dream began to take shape. On one of those nights, the nightclub pulsed with the energy of the crowd, immersed in the enchantment of Jeremy's voice. That's when his eyes met Isabel's. With her brown hair dancing under the colorful lights and her eyes shining with sharp intelligence, she was amidst the crowd, yet she seemed to stand out. Isabel, a recent law school graduate, had come to celebrate the beginning of her professional career. Her passion for music led her to Jeremy's show, and the depth of his lyrics kept her captivated. After the show, she approached him, a gleam of admiration in her eyes. "I really love your music," she said, her eyes meeting his with sincerity. "Your voice, there's something about it that truly touches me." Jeremy smiled, enchanted by her sincerity. "Thank you, Isabel," he replied, remembering the name she had mentioned when introducing herself. "Music is my life. I'm glad you enjoy it." Thus began the romance of Jeremy and Isabel, which quickly became a pillar of support in his life. Isabel proved to be a devoted companion, always there to applaud him, advise him, and comfort him. And in return, Jeremy dedicated love songs to her that made her heart soar. Together, they faced the trials and triumphs of life, always united by love and music. The relationship between Jeremy and Isabel seemed to paint a picture of idyllic love and companionship, but a revelation would test the strength of their bond. On a quiet evening, after a homemade dinner, Isabel gathered the courage to share news that would shake Jeremy's world. Her pale face and anguished eyes signaled something serious. And with a trembling tone in her voice, she said, "Jeremy, I'm pregnant." The impact of the statement momentarily left Jeremy speechless. His heart pounded against his chest as if it wanted to escape, and his mind filled with thoughts of fear and uncertainty. He was frightened and scared, lost in a sea of conflicting thoughts. Seeing Jeremy's panic, Isabel quickly added, "I know it's a big step, Jeremy. I know it can be scary. But I want you to understand something. I'm not going to terminate this pregnancy, even if you decide to leave me." Those words snapped Jeremy out of his trance. He looked at Isabel, at this woman he loved, so strong and determined amidst a storm of uncertainty. He felt a mix of emotions, fear, anxiety, but also a touch of admiration. Swallowing his fear, Jeremy took Isabel's hands and said, "Isabel, I'm scared. I'm really scared. But I'm not going to abandon you. We'll face this together, as we always have. The concern in her eyes gave way to a sense of resolution and determination. Yes, things were about to change drastically, but Jeremy wasn't ready to give up. He was passionate about Isabel, and now there was another life coming, a life he was determined to love and protect. And so, with the promise of support, they decided to face the new journey unfolding before them. The day Isabel went into labor was a whirlwind of emotions for Jeremy. Nervousness and anticipation consumed every fiber of his being as he held Isabel's hand, trying to convey some kind of comfort, despite his own heart pounding uncontrollably. The atmosphere in the hospital was controlled chaos, doctors and nurses rushing around, preparing everything for the birth of their daughter. But the joyful and nervous anticipation quickly turned into a nightmare. Isabel had severe complications during childbirth. Jeremy, the doctor said, his voice heavy and tired. We did everything we could, but Isabel didn't make it. The words hit him like a punch in the gut. Jeremy's world seemed to crumble in an instant. The woman he loved, the woman who had given him the greatest gift of life, was gone. That night, Jeremy cradled in his arms his little daughter, Christiane, who was the perfect combination of the two of them. She was beautiful, with rosy cheeks and tiny fingers that closed around Jeremy's finger with surprising strength. Looking at that little life, Jeremy felt an agonizing pain in his chest, but also a fierce determination. Christiane, he whispered to his sleeping daughter, your father will take care of you. I promise, my angel. Jeremy was lost, devastated, and now faced with a monumental mission, to be both mother and father to little Christiane. But amidst the pain, he knew he was not alone. He had his daughter, and together, they would navigate the stormy sea of life. Jeremy was helpless. Isabel, the woman he loved so much, had endured a difficult life, losing her parents at a young age and going through an orphanage in her teens. Despite all the adversity, she managed to rise above through education, achieving the coveted law degree and establishing a successful career. But even with all her professional success, Isabel hadn't been able to build a solid support network that could be there for her, and now, for Jeremy in little Christiane, in difficult times. On the other hand, Jeremy had left his own parents behind in his pursuit of success in the big city. They still resided in rural Illinois, in a small rural town where Jeremy had grown up. They were old, with the burdens of time weighing on their bodies and minds, rendering them unable to provide the needed assistance to their son and newborn granddaughter. Therefore, the responsibility of raising little Christiane fell entirely on Jeremy's shoulders. He faced the challenge with the determination and courage that had marked his journey thus far. He balanced a busy life between nighttime performances and the daily care of his daughter, changing diapers, preparing bottles, and cradling Christiane in his arms during sleepless nights. His heart was broken by the loss of Isabel, but he strived to keep a smile on his face for his daughter, wanting to be the safe harbor she needed in the tempestuous sea of life. Jeremy plunged into a daily struggle to balance his life. Difficulties seemed to want to engulf the poor man, increasingly pressed by the complexity of single parenthood and the demands of his artistic career. Many nights, he found himself forced to bring little Christiane to the bars where he performed, cuddling her in a quiet corner so she could sleep, away from the deafening noise of the main hall. Sometimes, when money allowed, he hired babysitters to take care of the girl at home, but the frequent changes of caregivers brought instability to Christiane's already tumultuous life. And while he tried to juggle the demands of his life, the cherished music career seemed to enter a cruel decline. The shows that were once abundant now dwindled, and with each performance, the audience dispersed, diminishing over time. The weight of the difficulties began to drag Jeremy into the abyss of frustration. He turned to alcohol, seeking solace in drink for the pain of his losses and failures. In this whirlwind, little Christiane, his greatest treasure, became increasingly neglected. The girl, once embraced by a loving father, now found herself mostly alone, lost in the shadow of a father sinking deeper into his own torment. On a somber afternoon when Christiane was 7 years old, Jeremy found himself with no viable option for her care. With a heavy heart, he left little Christiane alone in their old apartment, promising to return as soon as possible. She was a resilient and brave child, having learned to fend for herself earlier than any child should. When her stomach growled with hunger, she decided she could make something to eat on her own. She walked to the kitchen, grabbed a pot, and gathered the ingredients to make a simple soup, a recipe she had seen her father make many times. But being still a child and lacking sufficient knowledge of stove handling, she ended up causing a small fire. The flames quickly spread through the kitchen, consuming everything in their path. Fear gripped Christiane as she stood frozen, staring at the flames in panic. In a stroke of luck, a neighbor, Mrs. Haida Kellett, happened to be passing by the street when she saw smoke coming out of the apartment window. With a bad feeling, she ran into the building and up the stairs to the apartment door. There, she found a frightened Christiane, standing by the door, wide-eyed and full of fear. "Haida?" Christiane asked, her voice trembling. "Christiane, my dear, come with me now," Haida shouted, grabbing the girl's hand and pulling her away from the growing danger. Thanks to Haida's quick and courageous action, Christiane was saved from that terrifying situation, an act of kindness that would change the course of their lives. Haida Kellett was a woman of dignity, already halfway through her 50th year. A widow, she felt the stillness of her house reverberating in her soul. Her 2 grown children had formed their own families, leaving her with an empty nest. However, this woman with a motherly spirit still had much love to offer. On that chaotic afternoon, when she saved Christiane from the fire, Haida realized how neglected the girl was. With a firm determination in her gray eyes, she decided to offer herself to Jeremy to take care of the little one. She knocked on the door of the apartment still marked by the soot of the fire and faced the disheveled and weary Jeremy. "Jeremy, we need to talk," she began with a firm and gentle voice. "Ah, Haida, Jeremy started to respond but was interrupted. "No, listen. Christiane needs more care, more love," she said, looking directly into his eyes. "I understand that you're going through tough times. We all do. But she's just a child." Jeremy, despite his apathetic state, knew that Haida was right. He took a deep and solitary look at his daughter who watched him with wide, frightened eyes. I need help, Haida. I don't know what I'm doing," Jeremy confessed, the words coming out in a whisper. Haida nodded. "I know, Jeremy. And I'm here to help. I can take care of Christiane. I want to take care of her." Thus, with the weight of the world feeling a little lighter, Jeremy accepted Haida's offer. And so, Haida became Christiane's safeguard, a new and loving presence in the girl's life, full of promise and affection. With the passing of seasons, an unbreakable bond formed between Haida and Christiane. The hours they spent together wove stories of tenderness and love, creating a relationship deeper than any blood tie could build. For Christiane, Haida was the refuge, the oasis in the desert of chaos that her father's life had become. While Jeremy wandered through sleepless nights in Chicago in search of stages that would give him a fleeting glimpse of brilliance or drowned himself in the bitter ocean of drink, Haida and Christiane nurtured their own little world. They cooked together, small hands and wrinkled hands working in harmony. Homework became enjoyable moments rather than obligations, and bedtime stories were narrated with patient love and care. "I like it when you help me with my homework, Haida," Christiane would say, her eyes shining with satisfaction. "Haida, you cook better than my dad," Christiane admitted one day, savoring the vegetable stew. Haida smiled, responding with joy and love in her gaze, "We're in this together, my dear. In the unspoken words, in the shared meals, in tight embraces and innocent laughter, Christiane found a home. Heida's constant and nurturing presence became an anchor in her life, replacing the erratic absence of her own father. And though Christiane's heart ached from Jeremy's absence, she found comfort and love in Heida's arms. On a cold November morning, shortly after Christiane turned 10, Jeremy entrusted her, as always, to the warmth and care of Heida's home. The usual promises of return were made, but that night, the hours stretched in silence, and Jeremy didn't come back. Darkness grew and swallowed the hope of his return, leaving Christiane anxious and Haida worried. A new day dawned, and Jeremy still hadn't shown up. His silence echoed loudly in the house, filling every corner with his absence. Haida, with a heavy heart, found something that made her blood run cold, a letter in her mailbox, Jeremy's unmistakable handwriting revealing itself on the crumpled page. Dear Haida, the letter began, an opportunity has arisen in New York, a chance to reignite my career, a glimmer of hope in endless darkness. I would be lying if I said I didn't yearn for it, for a taste of the life I once lived. The letter continued, but the road to the big city is rocky and uncertain, not a place for a child. Christiane is my light, my sun, and my stars, but I cannot take her into this uncertainty. It is a burden I carry with great pain. With each word, Haida's heart grew heavier, but she held her emotions as she read aloud to Christiane, who watched her with scared and confused eyes. I implore you, Haida, take care of my star. I am lost in the darkness, but perhaps, in your kindness, you can be the light that guides Christiane. I beg of you. And so, the letter concluded, leaving a palpable silence in the room. Jeremy's signature at the end felt almost like a farewell, a whispered goodbye that would haunt the future days. Jeremy's absence became a permanent shadow, a ghostly part of Christiane and Haida's lives. Over the years, Haida had seen Christiane blossom into a kind and curious child under her care. She had been there from the early scribbled drawings to her school stories, taught her to cook her first meals, and told her bedtime stories about the world.